Hmm. Okay, this should be back on. Let's see what happens now. All right, now this says live again. So we're going to try again. Okay. I don't know if anybody's going to come back for the second time. We'll see how long this lasts. This is just a test to see if I can get it to operate correctly and cooperate with me. If anybody can hear me, you're going to have to let me know if I'm talking too loud into the microphone, because I might have it turned up a little too loud. So far, so good. Wait a second, see if anybody sees this chat. I don't think so. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. I do have some stories to live read out of the random blue. So if you're here, make sure you let me know that you're here. Yeah, it really is an odd part of the day. It really is. And what's funny is right before I started the live stream, it was pretty clear here, and now it is raining, and it wasn't even supposed to rain. Hey, Gling. Hey. How's everybody doing? You guys surviving? Surviving the wild that is planet Earth right now? Hey. I'm not going to try to pronounce your name because I'm going to do it wrong. So, yeah. I have some stories if you guys want me to read them. Or if you just want to chat, we can do that too. I was just giving the equipment an old dusting off. I know it's been a really long time. Too long. I'm sure like everyone else. Hey, here but can't stay. Have huge rocks to pull out of the basement. We'll listen later. I'm sorry. Doing good. I'm all right. Like everybody else, there was a lot of stressful events back to back to back, and it's really hard to like try to be a distraction to others when you yourself need a distraction. So a lot of overwhelming things. It's fine. No one died, but it was just a lot. And if anybody else is like me, where one event kind of like consumes your whole life, and then to have several events, like, well, our dog did die, so I guess that's a stressful event. Just a few family things, but they weren't bad things, just kind of consuming the year. So good. I don't know if you guys want to hear stories or not, or if you just want me to like blather on as per usual. You'll have to let me know if anything cuts out. So far, this feed seems to be pretty strong. So I found some almost kidnapped stories if you guys want to hear those, but you could also request something if you want. You'll have to let me know. Oh my gosh, congratulations, Kling. I bet you do. I bet you do. That's phenomenal. That's so cool. I have 2 computers set up in my kitchen, and I am reading the chat on my iPad just to make sure that each device continues working as I want it to. I never understood why people needed 2 screens until right now. Like ever. And what's funny is my husband got me a newer computer for Christmas, but it's what are these, a Chromebook, and they're not compatible with most software. So I was going to Streamlab on the newer computer because it's faster, but a lot of things are not compatible with Chrome OS. If anyone's familiar, please let me know how you can relate to that. Very frustrating factoid. All right. I found some almost got kidnapped stories today, and I thought you guys might want to hear them. Oh, yeah. Well, happy belated birthday. Happy birthday to anyone who's listening to this, because it's been over a year since I've been on YouTube, so. You know what, though? I was able to download Streamlabs app on my iPad, so I was going to stream from my iPad, but I like to have like a video playing in the background while I'm reading and not just my face. Super self-conscious about, like, I don't know how people do it, how they're on camera all the time, because for me, the thought of what I look like on the screen the entire time would consume my thoughts during the entire time I'm trying to read a story. So I was going to live stream from the iPad, because I guess you can do that now. But that's only if you want everyone to stare at your beautiful face the whole time, which I don't. So, yeah. Anyways, I have an almost got kidnapped story right in front of me. Actually, I found a bunch of them. If you're interested, you guys. So, I found so many that I think I can do a video in addition to a live stream. I mean, if you guys haven't been aware, there's been a lot of people that have been set up to be taken, whether that's to be trafficked, kidnapped, or whatever, because you can only, if you're not taken, you can only assume what the intention was. But it's pretty common. There's always people warning you about an incident that happened to them, and they weren't sure because it seems so suspicious. And so, each one that you hear, again, not to make people stay in fear or be afraid to go out to the store or wherever. Just keep your head on a swivel, Be aware of your surroundings. I've always said that. It still makes me a worrywart sometimes for other people, not for myself. I don't know why. I have self-preservation. I'm just not, I don't know. I don't think I'm a target, like, because I look mean. If you don't know me. So anyway, here's the first I was almost kidnapped story. But it starts out as, this one says, sometimes I wonder how close this was to a real kidnapping. I don't know if I would consider it emotionally scarring, but I don't think I'll ever be able to forget the helplessness that accompanied the experience. This occurred about 6 months ago. This is from Quora, if anyone wants to know where this is from. How many people have strange dreams and things correspond to those? Ooh, you know what? Lucid dreaming. I think that's what you're talking about. I just heard a bunch of stories about that this morning. Okay, back to the kidnapping story that I was reading. Well, almost kidnapped, I guess. So I had this friend over at my house who was always complaining about her parents. She suffered from severe depression since a young age and deals with abusive parents. I always thought her mother was the problem, as when I'm in her presence, she constantly degrades and insults her daughter. But my friend will call her Sadie, insists that her father is worse. Her father always seemed like a really friendly guy. Sure, he might get mad sometimes, but he's affable and has lots of friends. I trust Sadie, but I'd also never felt uncomfortable around her father until this experience. Okay, so I guess that was a setup. Sadie was at my house and her father arrived to pick her up. He jokingly suggested that I go out instead of her and pretend to be her. I thought it was hilarious and decided to do that. Oh, she jokingly. I thought he said that. I'm so sorry. My phone was in the kitchen and I didn't want to go get it, so I just ran out, thinking I'd have a bit of fun and say hi. The windows weren't open and he was sitting inside the car, so I just decided to get in and said, "Hi, Dad," as I closed the door. I was trying hard to suppress my grin but failed. He wasn't smiling. "Oh, hi, Sadie," he said, and shifted the car into drive. My stomach slipped several notches. He hadn't looked in the rearview mirror. Had he somehow not caught the fact that I wasn't Sadie? I said, "I'm not actually Sadie, it's Sarah." "Oh, don't be silly, Sadie," he said, continuing to drive down my street at a normal driving speed, then turning left towards Sadie's house, which was 15 minutes away. I felt this feeling of helplessness, like there was nothing I could do about the situation. My phone was back at the house, so I couldn't contact anyone or even tell my mom that I was okay. Sadie's dad kept driving toward her house. Her dad still wasn't smiling and still was driving toward her apartment. It became clear that he was pissed and wasn't going to take me home without shaking me up a bit. Wow, that was quite a conclusion to jump to. Anyway, we proceeded to drive away from my house for at least another 4 minutes, and during that time I kept saying, "Okay, seriously, take me home." To which he'd reply, "But Sadie, we are going home." To which I would wonder how far he was willing to go just to prove his point. He was making me afraid and extremely uncomfortable, but I had no idea what to do. He wasn't listening to me anyway, and I couldn't contact anyone for help or even just support. I was alone. Finally, he turned around and dropped me back off at my house. I hastily got out of the car and said goodbye to Sadie, who had the misfortune to actually have to go home with her dad, who was obviously upset about the little stunt that we pulled. I'd never seen him behave like that before, which was a switch that had been switched on somehow. Like he migrated over this part of his personality that he didn't visit in public. I was suddenly able to understand just why Sadie hated her dad so much. I've wondered since then if he has ASPD. Maybe he's a sociopath or a psychopath, but I've never gotten in the car with him since then. I mean, I don't know about that. I don't know if that's really I don't know if that's an almost kidnapped story, but he sounds creepy. Is everybody still here? I can't believe how good this is working, so I don't want to jinx it. Do you guys want more of this, or should I change to something else? Let me see this one. This one says, when I was 6, I lived with my grandmother in a small village, and during that specific time, there were reports of children going missing. What my mom did was reinforce what she had taught me all along. Don't get close to a stranger. Don't go close or into the car of a stranger. If a stranger requests anything from you, always come home and ask. If a stranger wants to show you something, always come home and ask. So I was walking home from a friend's in the late afternoon, just before the lanterns turn on. The street lanterns was the rule for all kids to be home by that time. About 5 minutes from my grandmother's house, there was a lady standing by her car on the curve of the main road through the village. She started talking to me, but I had never seen her before. So I stopped, but as I was taught, I kept a good distance. She used tons of excuses to get me close to her and her car. She wanted to show me puppies. How cliche. Then she wanted me to hand a note. Then she wanted to hand me a note, and then she asked me for a pen. So when she asked me for a pen, I told her I needed to go home and get a pen, and she made no more attempts. I ran home and told my grandmother and my mom that I needed a pen real quick. They asked me why I needed a pen, and so I told her about the lady with the car. My mom got super angry, which at the time I didn't understand. I knew she wasn't angry at me because I did what she taught me. She said the lady shouldn't ask children for things. Then she asked me to show her the lady, so I led her back to where the lady was before. But she and her car were gone. Ooh. Yikes. I don't know. Like, almost kidnapped. I mean, there's way more stressful scenarios like this, but let's keep going. This next one, and this is from 5 years ago, this one says. I didn't even look at how long ago the other ones were from. 6 years ago. The first one was 4 years ago. And this one is from 5 years ago, so let's see. Gling says, I have my own almost kidnapped story. I was almost kidnapped while I was in kindergarten. We didn't have a car when I was little and had to walk to and from school. Was walking home one day and a guy tried to get me in his car. I ran up onto a porch and he drove off. Well, I have one too, Gling. Mine involves a lot of unanswered questions. There was a guy that worked with and for my dad when I was a kid who I don't remember everything that happened, so and my dad has passed away, so I can't ask him questions about this. I think I just kind of put it to the side of my head like it was a fact we all knew, but we just didn't talk about. Who tried to take me, and I don't know what happened after that. I don't know if my dad scared him away. Like, he got me out. The guy was trying to take me from my parents' place. I was in the truck backing away, and I could see my dad coming after the truck. And I don't remember seeing that person working for my dad again. I don't remember anyone ever talking about it again. I remember my mom mentioning it, but we never talked about what happened to the guy. So I think a lot of people probably have these situations that almost happened to them, but it's kind of locked away, because if you really sit there and think about if the person actually did take you, what would have happened? And I'm sure you think about that all the time. I have a huge fear of that happening to other people, so this is right up my alley. Yeah, same to you, Gling. It was a long time ago. I was a little kid, just like you. Didn't know any better, It was someone I saw often working with my dad, so I didn't think anything about getting in his vehicle. Oh, yeah. All right, let's see. This one's from 5 years ago. It's anonymous. This says, when I was a young kid, 11 or 12, I think, and my parents limited my exposure to technology, made me play outside for at least 2 hours a day. As such, I spent a lot of time exploring our neighborhood and became well acquainted with all the places of interest to a kid. One place I frequented was an old house closer to town whose owners were just always away. It was old, and it was in ill repair. The owners didn't care very much about it at all. There was a hole that a small kid like me could slip into and get into the house. I made it my personal hangout and went there almost every day. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. The week leading up to the event, I was vaguely aware of an unfamiliar car parked across the old house that was there every time I came to enter through the hole. I didn't pay much attention to it, even though I knew whoever was in the car could probably see me crawling through the hole into the house. I didn't figure they'd care much about some kid playing around in an old house. The thought that they were watching me enter the house every day never crossed my mind. One day, while my parents were out, I entered the house as usual to play with my toys. The hole was in the basement wall, so I entered the house through the dark basement. The basement was big and spooky and freaked me out, so I never really explored it. I just hurried straight through to the stairs and up into the main rooms of the house. I went up the stairs and into the kitchen. Sitting on the kitchen counter was a man, waiting for me. His figure casually leaning against the counter, silhouetted by the light from the kitchen window, and it's forever burned into my brain. He smiled at me and walked toward me, saying hello. I didn't know what to do. I was scared that he was the owner and he had returned to punish me for going into his house. He told me that this was his house, confirming my fears. But then he reassured me by adding that he was a rich man with lots of houses and that he didn't mind if I played in this one. He said that, in fact, he bought a cool present for me for taking such good care of his house, and that was back in the basement. I have no idea what I was thinking, but I said thank you and went back down the basement stairs. Maybe I was shocked from finding another person in what I believed to be my personal hideaway. Maybe I was so relieved that I wasn't being punished that I didn't think clearly. All I know was that I was really dumb to believe him. As I walked down the basement stairs, the man in the kitchen followed close behind. And when I was only a few steps from the bottom, he pushed me. I fell past the stairs, onto my hands and knees, and screamed at the pain from landing on the hard concrete floor. As I tried to get up, another person tackled me, one who must have been waiting in the darkness of the basement. This one was very fat, and his weight pinned me down easily. Together, the two men pinned me to the concrete floor, each one with an iron grip on my arms. I was kicking and struggling, but was too scared to scream. I'm going to pause right here and say I have not read these in advance, so I don't know where this is going to take us. Hold still, said one of them, and pinned me down with a foot as he fumbled with my pants. I wasn't a very innocent kid. I had watched enough TV to have a basic understanding of what they were trying to do to me, and the knowledge horrified me so much that I redoubled my efforts to escape. I found my voice and started to scream at the top of my lungs. The fat one put his hand over my mouth and I bit him. He screamed and jerked away from me, nursing his hand and shaking it around. The other man swore at him to come back and help, and straddled me with his legs to hold me still. That was his mistake. I managed to knee him in the crotch. Not very hard, but hard enough to make him yell and loosen his grip on me. Enough to wiggle away. I bolted for the stairs. I was almost at the top of the stairs when I turned around to see them pursuing me and speaking in low, threatening voices, telling me to come back or else. Their threats scared me so much that I almost stopped and let them catch me, but I continued running. I ran up the second flight of stairs, into one of the upstairs bedrooms, and opened the window, kicking the screen out. I hesitated for a long moment before dangling from my fingertips and dropping. Landing hurt, but I was an adventurous kid who knew how to land from jumping out of trees. I wanted to find an adult to protect me, and I was scared of them following me home, so I sprinted into town instead of my house. The first building I saw was a hospital, so I ran inside and tried to explain what had happened to a nurse. I wasn't super coherent, being very scared and out of breath, but the nurse heard enough of my story and saw enough of my dirty, bloody, and bruised hands and knees to call the police. My parents were contacted, and I gave them the best description I could. The men weren't caught, but I never went anywhere near that house again and spent most of my time playing indoors from then on. Ooh, that one was freaking scary. Enclave says, always insecure until I was 10. I didn't trust many people, including my grandfather, not because my grandfather was a bad guy. It's because I didn't trust anyone, including good friends. I think that's the worst betrayal for people, though. It's the people that's close to them that hurt them. Here's one from 3 years ago. Do you guys want me to keep going with this? Is this bothering anybody? This is from 3 years ago from Lily Jones. Again, these are on Quora.com, if anybody wants to read along. It says, this isn't my story, but something that happened to my younger sisters. My sister Amara is 14, and this happened last month. So last month, 3 years ago. My sister Margot is 11. So Amara's 14, and her other sister Margot is 11. Two important things to note. Margot is selectively mute from a break-in when we were younger, so doesn't talk to strangers or really anyone outside of our family. Okay, so the 11-year-old is selectively mute. That's probably important for the story. And that was the 11-year-old. And the 14-year-old, Amara, doesn't have a cell phone. So Amara and Margot were at Margot's friend's house for a birthday party. Amara knows the kid's older sibling, so she was invited to keep them company. The party ended at 4:30, and there was a 30-minute walk back to our house from there. I was on supper duty that night, and I was there with my brothers. From what I know, they were about 10 to 15 minutes from our house when they saw a van pull up in front of them. They don't pay much attention to it, so they keep walking as two men hop out and stand next to the car. Amara told me she thought they were just waiting to go up to the house after my sisters had passed. One of the men commented on how nice the weather was as they passed. So Amara, the best-mannered one in the family, says that it is, and to have a good day. And as they pass, the guy closest grabs Margot's arm and tells her it's rude not to respond when people talk to you. Amara sternly tells the man to let go of her sister because their house is right up the street, and if they touch her, she'll yell and her dad'll come. Of course, this is a lie. The man lets go of Margot and they hurry up the road. And when they get to the corner, Amara looks back to see the men staring at them. I thought you lived there, one said. Amara didn't respond, just hurried Margot down the road, and they made it to the next crosswalk before they heard the van behind them. Yikes. And then they booked it. Amara said they ran up the street and around a corner, and when they realized they were definitely being followed, they jumped a fence and ran through someone's yard until they were on our street. They were halfway to our house when the van sped by, saw them, backed up, and turned into the road. I was in the house when I heard banging on the door, and Amara screaming bloody murder, trying to make as much noise as she could. My brothers and I ran to the door, and my sister barged in crying, panting, and covered in scrapes. Amara explains the situation, and my brothers run out the door and into the street yelling at these guys to get away. I called my parents and grabbed a knife just in case they came inside. We hear the van speed off and my brothers come in. What happened after makes me glad our family loves track and field, and my sisters were able to get a head start. The police found a car, thanks to my brother's description, and one of them seeing the license plate. They had ropes and duct tape in the back of the van, along with several magazines of porn. That house they pulled up in front of also had some young girls living there. I'm glad my sisters escaped. Holy crap, dude. Man, you just gotta be mean and smart. I hate that people have to live their lives this way, but people that are trying to take other people are getting really crafty with how they do it. Anyway, this one is from 8 years ago, and this is from Janet Johnson from 8 years ago, or updated 8 years ago anyway. And it says, what is it like to be kidnapped? A friend was kidnapped by 3 strangers from a grocery store parking lot and put into her own car trunk. They drove her to a remote location about 150 miles away where they had lots of survival equipment. They assaulted her in the worst way and beat her for 4 days. And then they told her they were going to kill her. They made her dig her own grave. She saw a man and a child canoeing in a river far below where she was handcuffed and sitting by a fire with 2 of the men. She ran and jumped off a very steep cliff into the river below, knowing that she would likely die, but she survived. The man in the canoe was an off-duty police officer, and another officer was in a boat behind them. They radioed for an ambulance and backup, and then the men were apprehended, tried, and convicted. They did 11 years and are now out of prison. My friend lives in a prison of her own, rarely leaving her apartment as she lives in fear that they will come after her if they can find her. She lives under a semi-assumed name and had her parents and sister put her apartment and utilities in their name. She will never be a whole person again. They took something away from her that simply cannot be made right. And that, my friends, is why people that sexually assault should never get out of prison. Not ever. If you can find someone in prison that can be of some use to society, fine. But that doesn't mean that they get to just go back to living their lives normally. And I don't care if it was 3 years ago or if it was 30 years ago. If you hurt someone in a manner, you steal something from them that can never be replaced, you never deserve to see the light of day again. I'm still never going to understand why people like that are put on a registry and then allowed to enter society again. There's even a Facebook page of a mom that's trying to get rid of the sex registry because she said it's ruining her son's life. I think that she should count her lucky stars that her son's still alive after what he did to someone else. I just want you guys to be aware of the fact that someone's trying to get rid of the sex registry since we're talking about this. That should never go away. But it shouldn't have to exist because people shouldn't be out in public like that. We've talked about that on here a lot. About what to do if you find out that someone who is an offender moves into your neighborhood. Years ago, Oprah back in the day had a person of this nature on her show, and she asked, what do you think people should do if someone like you moves into their neighborhood? And he said, first of all, find out if they're violent. Find out if they're violent. Second of all, keep your kids away from their house. You tell everybody that you know. Third, you need to go to their door and let them know that you know who they are and you know what they've done. And if you ever see them near any kids, you will not hesitate to take any action. The reason he said this was because I guess that's their worst fear is being known. They don't want anyone to know their dirty little secret. So if you let them know their dirty little secret, they're never going to do anything that's going to draw attention to themselves in that way. Yeah, like he should never be out. By the way, did you know there's a YouTube channel that has your name almost? It's something like Duchess of Darkness. Do they read scary stories? Should I look this person up? Duchess of Darkness. I'm so curious now. Can I find this out? Duchess of Darkness? Really? Oh no. Wow, I can't believe it. That's wow. All right. I guess they read scary stories too. Guess I better get my A game on. Let's see, there's a image there. Let me see. Okay. This one says, what is the closest you've been to being kidnapped? And this is from Eric Tucker, updated 6 years ago. So it's not like these are like stories from last month that someone uploaded. These are older. Yeah, that's crazy. I can't believe there's another channel like that. Okay, anyway, this one says, not even my family knows other than my wife. Around 1988 or 89, making me 19 or 20, I was lured into a vehicle and then held against my will by a predator. It was one reason, aside from my conservative Protestant upbringing, that I hated. He said he hated gays for a number of years. Oh, so he thought that anyone that was... okay, I get it. It took knowing a regular gay people around me, not the flamboyant ones. I don't know why they said that. For me to learn that gay people are regular people deserving of the same rights and dignity that I have. Okay. Anyway, one weekend afternoon, I was riding back to the University of Hawaii from the Ala Moana shopping center on my mountain bike east along South King Street. Within a couple of blocks, a Caucasian man in his late 20s pulled alongside me in an early 80s Nissan 210 hatchback brown, very specific. Almost identical to his, but more an M&M brown. The driver leaned to the passenger side window and asked me for directions to a basketball court. I replied that there were some basketball courts further along that street. He asked me to get in and show him. I agreed, and he put my bicycle into the back, and I sat in the front seat. We made small talk. He claimed to know my father. 30 years ago, I would believe things like that. I trusted people back then. I pointed out the basketball courts I was referring to near Zippy's McCully. We continued driving. He claimed he meant someplace else. That's when he began resting his right hand on my bare thigh and stroking it. I was too confused to react. I didn't want this to get back to my father. The man continued driving for a while. He took me into the parking lot of an elementary school of Waikiki, next to a major road and near an H1 highway on-ramp. I'm looking at a Google map, but I'm unable to find the name of such a place now. Despite being next to a major road, we were alone. There was a scattering of cars in the parking lot, but it was the weekend. I'm not going to tell you what he did to me next, but the thought that maybe I could have screamed and someone in the office could have heard me, but I was too ashamed to be seen, and the fact that I carried a small pocket knife in my bag and could have tried to defend myself haunts me to this day. I was frozen. A few years ago, my vintage Honda CB 750 motorcycle broke down on the highway around midnight, and I abandoned it next to a golf course and began the long walk home. A plainly marked yellow-orange state vehicle, a large street sweeping truck with 3 men in it, pulled up and offered me a ride. I didn't get in because I don't trust groups of strange men. Also, the day of the attack, I was wearing what I usually wore in those days: a surf company t-shirt, swim shorts, Shorts were shorter in those days. Even girls complimented me for my fair skin and shapely and hairless legs back then. I was 5'6" and 115 pounds at the time. And because of this experience attracting the attention of gay predators, other men that had noticed me before, I stopped wearing shorts in public for about 10 years. Until I was old enough to be a father and take my own children to the beach. But I still wear long-sleeved surf rash guards over my upper body from view. When the man was finished with me, he wiped me with a dirty towel he kept behind the seat and let me out near my university and said, "Maybe we can meet again." I went back to my dorm and showered immediately and cried and never reported it. As I said, I hated gays for years because of this. I do not now. Do I need to remind you that I'm a man and was already an adult when this happened? And as a man, I never expected that this would happen to me. I've been arrested before and shared a cell with a man who said he was there for kidnapping his own daughter. I have more experience than 4 and 5 or 3 and 4 women, so I do not appreciate the patronizing tone about sexual assault and rape, about how women are the victims or men don't get it. I am alive because some predator decided to leave me alive and gloat over it. Well, that was a bit confusing, but sad. Sad. This one says, it's weird because, it's almost implied when someone tries to take someone, most of the time it's not for ransom money, That's the messed up part. It's all messed up. But it's just like, you don't really have to explain that, do you? If someone's trying to take someone, it's just kind of implied that that's what's going through their head. This one is from Ding Dong from 4 years ago. And this says, did you almost get kidnapped as a kid? And how did you get away? And they say, seriously, within the last hour, I was thinking of this as something I'd love to share as a response because I might be addicted to Quora. I didn't even know this was a thing. Is this like Reddit? That's Stronk. When I was 12, I was walking to my babysitter's house from school. There was a van idling on the opposite side of the street as I walked past. The man in the van shouted, "Hey, do you know where Vernon Ave is?" I did. I was only a few blocks away. I told him the directions, talking loudly still on the opposite side of the road. He asked, "Can you come closer? I can't hear you." I approached halfway closer to him and repeated my response, to which he moved his once visible right hand from the steering wheel down towards where I assumed the latch to the open door was, and asked again if I could come closer because he couldn't hear me. I was only half a block away from my destination, so I ran as fast as I could. Weeks after that, a young girl was attacked as she walked to her front door by a man lying in wait at the exact location. And that's exactly why people need to speak up when something has happened to them, so that it doesn't happen to another person. Even if you're a little kid, I know that's got to be absolutely terrifying. This was from a year ago, from Ashley LaRoque. All right, so this says, I was 12. I lived down the street from a farmer's market and would often walk my dog up there. She was a super friendly beagle. I was walking along the side and the deserted market. It was only open on Sundays. And I saw a car pull up on the opposite side. I saw a car pull up on the side of the road in front of the market. There was a big empty space between us. I stopped walking and watched. I always am super aware of strangers and just very cautious around them. Still am. Aside from the neighborhood kids, the market was normally abandoned during the week because it wasn't open. So I immediately found it strange that someone was there. This guy gets out of the car and looks right at me. That was enough for me. I started running back home and didn't look back. I don't know if he tried to follow me, or maybe since I was already far enough away from him, he didn't bother chasing after me. I never told my parents, which was unlike me. Man, my goodness. This is a really short one from 6 years ago from Judith Brands. What is a time when you were almost kidnapped as a kid? When I was 12, I thought that the 16-year-old boy who lived across the street from me was trying to kidnap me, so I kicked him, ran down a flight of stairs, and ran out of his house. Told my father what happened because I was only 12. I was unaware that this was an attempted rape. My escape added to my confidence that I could take care of myself. Okay. Yikes. All right. Are you guys still there? Just checking in. This one is from 5 years ago. Have you ever gotten away from almost being kidnapped? This person says, funny enough, yes. Well, that's not strictly true. In fact, I was kidnapped, but I did escape. So another busy day selling Class A on the main streets of Hereford. This is back in 2004. Another time, another age for me. Back then I'd be what's called in the street parlance flat out. What does that mean? That is to say very active in a criminal sense. Oh, okay. I'd recently stopped committing a plague of burglaries. Apart from pissing householders off, I was pissing the CID unit off too. There are sorts of crimes that piss off busies, as it's a recordable crime, a blip on their crime figures, and I was a one-man crime wave. Fortunately, though, I'd thankfully seen the error of my mischievous ways. I say mischievous. It wasn't. I was downright dastardly. That's a word. I haven't seen anybody write that in a long time. Kicking people's doors off, breaking down their windows at night to access their houses to steal their stuff. I'd taken the more nobler, in at least my eyes, profession of drug dealing instead. This I felt 100% necessary to fund/feed my rather largish heroin habit. Damn. Okay, this is a lot to unpack. So at 100 pounds a day, it wasn't massive, but it wasn't little either. Trying to find that amount of ready cash illegally every single day to starve of the wretched sickness was indeed a full-time job for me. So basically, he needed to find $100 every day so he could get high off of heroin. Okay. Well, anyone unfortunate enough to be cursed with an opiate addiction. Now, before anyone starts to even try to moralize my actions, I fully accept that what I was doing was deeply wrong, but back then I hadn't the rationale of a straight person. I was deeply afflicted, deeply conflicted, but sadly and deeply addicted, so no sane thoughts or actions were part of my program. I was all about trying to make that score money. Although I'd always sold different drugs, dope, acid, speed, base, Valium, ecstasy, heroin. Heroin was very hard to get and wait in the city. Cheaply at any rate, so you just get proactive and travel. So it was that day back in 2002 that I'm just pulling up with my driver after another successful mission scoring the fair city of Gloucester. It was easy to score there as opposed Hereford. Although only 28 miles away, it was another world for my city on the availability of cheap heroin in weight form. That being, it was impossible to score in Hereford unless she went to the guy who was now waiting, it seemed for me, as we pulled up. Okay, so it seems like he had a bad name for himself amongst other criminals, so that's where he's going to get himself in trouble, I think. Names have been changed. I'm not really into doing this as a rule, but I know full well that although I'm hated by the cops, this guy hated me more, and for good reason. And that's maybe for another time. For now, though, as I got out of the car, 7 grams of newly scored Class A gripped in my fist, I was being beckoned/summoned to a maroon 5-door people carrier. Inside sat Sean J., the driver, Ray Mutton, the muscle, and lastly, in the front passenger seat, sat the ominous presence known as Shane Black. Shane was the leading criminal in Hereford's drug scene. It was Shane who pretty much controlled the south side of the city. It was Shane who said you served up, who dealt it, and whether you bought off Shane at ridiculous prices or if you had difficulties. You see, Shane was an extremely violent individual. I mean, violence has its place, I guess. I've been involved in enough myself. Fight to the death type violence. Type, hell, I'd copped a severe artery off a knife and had quite the fight, but it's usually always in self-defense. Okay, the story is confusing me, so I hope you're all still there too, because this is confusing the crap out of me. Anyway, so Shane's a threat, obviously. He goes on and on about this. I'm gonna try and get to the part where. All right, so these guys are in the car. This guy's more violent than Chuck Norris, he's saying. I'm gonna summarize because it's too much. We don't need to know all the backstory. So he's invited into the back seat of the vehicle, and he sits next to Ray, which promptly leaving my driver still sitting in the back. Central locking works, I notice. Sean starts the engine, and we disembark from the curb to leave him behind, and we make the way up Belmont Road. Shane turns to tell me that his girlfriend Leda, who I owed 20 pounds to, wanted to see me at Tesco's Belmont to discuss the debt I managed. It could only be that. But right as we headed past the Belmont roundabout, central locking, heavy atmosphere, we drive past Tesco, down into the Callow, the proper sticks. I had a certain uneasy feeling that something wasn't right here. Being as it was Leda and Belmont, Tesco's was a rapidly fading memory. Where you just been, Mark? Shane asked me inquisitively. Okay. My Nan's. So you haven't been to Gloucester then? No. So you didn't swap places with Justin then? It was definitely a rhetorical question. I knew it. More importantly, Shane effing knew it. I don't understand what's going on here. Anyways, this is a really long story, and we are just going to skip over it because this is a book. I'm telling you, I hit scroll, and for 1 solid minute, that story wasn't over. So, yeah, sorry about that. If anyone was interested in that, if you could even follow along with it, because I couldn't. Anyway, we are now on to Jose Maldonado. This is from 5 years ago. And the question was, what is it like to be kidnapped? Jose says, I was kidnapped by a Colombian guerrilla group and spent 6 months captive deep within the Andean forests. Holy crap. It was in the 90s, at the peak of the Colombia's modern violence period, when illegal armed forces shared the country and ties with a booming drug-dealing industry, both highly financed in part by a widespread kidnap practice. The effect was so generalized that likely most anyone in Colombia old enough today can relate with a personal story, a family member or a close friend that it was in some way or another touched directly by the violence during that period. It was a cool December day when my family was traveling by car from Bogota City to our home in the northern part of the country, some 12 hours away. It was past Christmas, and in Colombia this meant carnival season. We were set to spend the remainder of the holiday, New Year's, and the subsequent weeks with the rest of our family and friends, celebrating on one of the multiple regional festivals that spawn all over the country during the first weeks of the year. I was 14. Somewhere halfway there was a roadblock into what seemed to be a military control point. Only it wasn't military at all. Several armed men in full camouflage patrolled in broad daylight, stopping cars and questioning the occupants. Luck had it that it was me sitting on the left side of the vehicle, behind the driver's seat. So when after a few seemingly routine questions were all asked to step out, it was me who followed my father to the left, toward the open landscape. Conversely, my mom and brother stepped out to the right against a hard rock mountain wall. After a couple more trivial questions, the man, being at the driver's side of the car, pointed to my father and me and said, quite blandly and matter-of-fact like, "Okay, so the two of you are now kidnapped." These few words, spoken so lightly, took a while to really sink in. I remember clearly looking up at my father, not quite sure what he'd make of such blunt news. After a couple of uneasy seconds, my father said firmly "Okay, we'll go." Given the few instants the whole ordeal took, the weight of what was going on didn't really hit me at the moment. Rather than an abrupt crash, the process was more like a slow-motion blur. Without really saying goodbye to Mom and brother, we obeyed the silent indications of the armed men to get off the road and step into the trees. Walking those few meters, we both looked back, me in confusion, my dad sending strong visual cues of strength and support to my mother. She screamed, the voice lingering on the air, until only a few places in when the thick Colombian flora swallowed us whole. We walked a few hundred meters into the forest and met a larger group of armed men. Leaders from both parties exchanged some whispers, and then we resumed the walking. From there, we walked in silence for hours. This time to ourselves was when everything began to take shape for me. So much walking in silence allowed for my mind to offer thousands of explanations of what could possibly be going on, only to eventually settle on the least creative and most obvious realization of the truth. I only managed to get through that day by having my father walking beside me, composed and stern as ever, regardless of the doubtless turmoils he was fighting in his own mind. We only stopped when he came out of the woods to meet a highway. We waited hidden until it was fully dark in order to cross and resume our walking, which continued long into the early morning hours. When we finally arrived into a farmer house and we were offered shelter, farmers in these regions, some more than others, were used to having armed traffic come through and allowed passing while seemingly looking the other way. No one said much, always an uneasy silence hanging over the group, which the farmer couple adopted instantly. The next day we were offered a surprisingly large breakfast. Surprising only by the circumstances, but not really by the context of where we were. After a coffee resupply, we moved on and got back to walking. This routine kept on for a couple of days. We walked, stopped at some house, farm or ranch, spoke seldomly, and walked again. My father and I spent New Year's Eve holding hands in silence, lying on the floor and holding back our tears, trying to keep our eyes closed and faces straight. By January 3rd, my father managed to hold some conversations with our captors, convincing them that my mother would need help sorting everything out. Being captured, he argued, he was unable to facilitate any negotiation. Eventually, they agreed to release him in order to work something out to get me back. I keep today and cherish fiercely the memory of my father holding me at arm's length, hands on my shoulders. We were nearly the same height, but that day he towered over me, calm and stern as ever. If only in his demeanor he looked straight into my eyes and said, "I will come back for you." Oh no. Oh my God. If today I write these lines, it is only because that statement was true. It wasn't even a promise. I don't think that the words were even meant for me, but rather for himself. He was vocalizing his plan, acknowledging that it was a hard fact. That was all I needed to know. He turned and walked briskly into the foliage. I followed his back until he was gone. What happened next could fill books, and this has run long as is. I was eventually released in mid-June, and for those months I traveled through a spiral of self-discovery that has strongly but not solely molded who I've become. A few thoughts that overarch the whole entire experience. Oh my God. There was a lot of walking involved. We seldom stayed more than 1 or 2 nights at the same place. I'm going to summarize because this is long. I slept on a hammock and became very adept at quickly setting it up and bringing it down. We usually slept under the stars, so I also found peace gazing into the night sky. It also rained a lot, so this wasn't always possible. I wasn't alone. A few weeks in, our group fused with another that held someone else. It took a while, but eventually let us connect, and our mutual presence gave each other strength. The other man was very depressed. He was older than me and starting a family, newlywed with a baby on the way. It was a devastating time to find himself in this situation. Our only link to the outside world was a little Sony radio that had this cool retractable wire antenna that could extend for 4 meters. Through this device, we kept up on top of news. We got supplies from markets. I had my 15th birthday sometime within this period. I celebrated bashfully with my roommate by regarding giant soursop, a guanabana fruit. Speaking of birthdays, I missed my brothers. I missed the birthdays of my 2 young cousins. I mentioned we moved hastily and longer than usual when we brushed with military forces. It wasn't often, around once a month. It was scary though, because for all practical purposes, my roommate and I were just 2 more of them. I'll add on that note that these guys were good. If you visited our campsites 5 minutes after we were gone, you would have never imagined any human had touched this nature in any ages. In ages. Okay, hold on. Speaking of these people and the toll taken by their decisions, it was sad realizing that for many of them, this was the only life they knew. I got to know around 20 or 30 people in changing groups over the 6 months. Most of them joined early on, as children, mostly recruited out of pressure. The usual tactic back then was getting close to farmer families and helping them with some issue. Your minds are easily molded. Let's see. Trying to get to this is a really long story too, so I'm really sorry. Okay, let's see. The person kidnapped takes the least amount of suffering. The most awful quality of this crime is uncertainty. Not knowing when, the how, the where can drive someone mad. As a protagonist, you know a lot of things. You know you're alive. You know you're well. You're fed. You're moving. Your only responsibility is to stay calm, be patient, keep it together. Nearly 6 months went on. We were released. We were given rough directions on how to reach the highway. We walked away warily nervous, but with every step our confidence grew. A few minutes in, we were running, laughing. The plan was to reach the highway and get a lift into whichever town was next. There was no one supposed to meet us or expect us. You would think we would rush out of the forest as fast as our feet could take us, but it wasn't so. Again, not an abrupt crash, but a slow-motion blur. We savored every step of the way out. We reached a nice pond and stopped to bathe to refresh. We took our time, changed our clothes, and moved on without any pending haste. I had grown fond of the forest, my hammock, the stars. Not that I didn't want to leave, but it was a process. We eventually found the road, and after a short while, a car found us that had apparently been looking for us. Even though we were told otherwise, our families were in fact told to expect us and instructed to send a car. We arrived at the town by late nightfall, where we finally met our families on a park. And this says life-changing consequences. Let's see. I don't know. It doesn't seem like anything bad. I mean, besides being taken, there wasn't anything bad. It kind of just goes on and on about details of the forest. So I'm going to go to the next one. This is from Michelle Ruerts from 1 year ago. What's the closest that you've been to being kidnapped? She says, waiting for a bus one day. A white van. Shocking. How many white vans? Why would you even buy a white van, man? A white van slammed to a stop in front of me. The door slid open, and I could hear drunken laughter from the 4 occupants, 2 up front, 2 in the back. The big guy, at least 6'3", in the back said, "Let's party," in a heavy Russian accent. I politely demurred. They said something else in Russian. Everyone laughed, and the big guy repeated his invitation. I don't know what "let's party" translates to in Russian, but one me versus 4 drunk guys did not sound promising or safe. Now the big guy is insistent with a "come on, let's party." I got up and moved behind the bench. I have now trapped myself between the bus shelter and the bench, and the big guy is lurching to his feet. And as he gets to the door of the van, the front passenger has opened the door, and I see a leg swing out. And I remember thinking, I'm dead. When the bus pulled in behind the van, the bus driver honking his horn for all he was worth, the side door of the van slammed shut and the van screeched off into the sunset. The bus driver asked what was going on, and I said I didn't know and sat down and shook until I reached my stop. Kidnapped? I don't know. Certainly scared the crap out of me and made me more cautious about positioning myself in bush. Oh my gosh. Weapons, people. I don't like that people have to wait by themselves like that. There's some people that have to take the bus late at night. Anyways, I could talk about that for hours. Anyway, Daniel K.H. Chung from 5 years ago. And this says, what is a time when you were almost kidnapped as a kid? He says, not me, but a former classmate suffered his fate as a 10-year-old kid. His parents ran a provision shop with living accommodation upstairs, and he used to stand at the end of the block next to a culvert to wait for the school bus to and from. One morning, while waiting for the bus, a bunch of 4 youths in a beat-up car pulled up, accosted him menacingly, and ordered him to meet them at that spot with $200 in the local currency on the second morning after. Okay. Dismissing the unsavory experience as a fluke and not wanting to tell his parents about the encounter, as a kid with behavioral problems which could draw some form of unwarranted punishment, he simply shifted his waiting spot to another place, as he was familiar with the bus route adjacent to approaching and leaving the vicinity. Over a fortnight later, I don't know what that means. He showed up very late for school, just before the recess break, with his uniform heavily crumpled, hair ruffled, face slightly swollen, and looking deep in a daze. His gregarious mouthiness had been switched off, and he was escorted into class and seated in his allocated place by a senior teacher. It was at this point that the class learnt all of what I've described in the preceding paragraphs, that the youth had found him at the new waiting spot, bundled him into the car, and took turns roughing him up in frustration for running away and not having the demanded cash on him. A customer witnessed the ordeal and questioned her shopkeeper, who immediately recognized the description of the boy and alerted his mother to her shop nearby. The police were sent for, and the luckless boy was recovered within 2 hours, partly because the youths were circling in a large arc around the newish, expanding residential area, while taking turns dishing out justice against this 10-year-old boy for the loss of their $200 of pocket money. He wasn't quite the same mouthy, gregarious kid for about 2 months after the incident, and that was a poignant live mention of the word kidnapped in class uttered by a concerned teacher. We kids did not grasp it fully at the time, but it obviously affected all of the teachers and staff a good deal more than it affected us pupils. That's sad. I mean, glad he wasn't hurt. That was scary. Okay, I'm going to skip that one because it's not someone that was kidnapped. Okay. This says, who has escaped being kidnapped and how? It was the first day of 4th grade, and I was walking back home from school with my best friend. He was on a bike. I was on foot. Suddenly, a brown, windowless van pulled up on our right side. The door slid open, and a big white man with short blonde hair jumped out. "Hey, you," he yelled. "Come over here." My friend and I exchanged looks. We both knew what was happening. This was serious. He took off on his bike, and I sprinted down the block. To my left was a 6-foot-high hedge. I had nowhere to go but straight. The man dashed after me. My heart was thumping so wildly I could feel it beating in my ears. I couldn't believe this was happening. Somebody was trying to kidnap me. I cleared the block, turned a corner, running as fast as humanly possible. When I saw my neighbor in his front yard, there was a moment of relief. I couldn't wait to tell him what was happening and ask for his help, but then I remembered he was deaf, and I knew no sign language. But I stood next to him anyway and started talking. He gave me an odd look, and I smiled awkwardly. When the man turned the corner and saw us, he hopped back into the van, and they revved up the engine and screeched away. After a minute, I took off through the deaf neighbor's backyard, climbed multiple fences, and made it back home. I locked the front door behind me and waited in my room until my parents got home. My parents were terrified. The police came. A report was filed. But they never found the men who tried to kidnap me. For 4 years, I was terrified of that van coming back. I memorized my entire neighborhood as well as multiple escape routes. I was always trying to hustle rides from my friends' parents. One day, I was sure I'd see it again. There was a deep place of anxiety and security inside of me where I was 100% sure they'd come back for me. Fear was a constant companion, and then there was anger. I was furious that this would happen to me. I was just a 9-year-old kid. I wasn't the son of a diplomat or a billionaire. I was just a normal kid. And I was mad that this happened to me so close to my home, in a place that's supposed to be safe and mine. Years later, when a group of kids tried to bully me in high school, I fought back every single day, even if that meant getting beat up until I earned their respect. The experience of almost being kidnapped taught me to always stand up for myself, because if I wouldn't, who knows how far I'd be pushed. In some strange way, it also helped me become an entrepreneur. I guess I have to read this part too. In 2005, I founded Quill, a startup providing freelancers with interest-free advances and other financial services. When 100 investors rejected us, I kept pushing. The 101st one backed us. When I'm closing a sale, I'm tapping into years of experience convincing parents to give me rides. Mapping out dangers and escape routes has helped me always stay prepared for hitches and problems. In hindsight, I'm not only grateful the experience didn't scar me psychologically, I'm also thankful that it helped me grow as a person. But I wouldn't wish that kind of heart-numbing terror on anyone. Okay, I almost didn't read his company stuff, but I figured it'd kind of be disrespectful since I read his story. Are we still here? Are we still listening? Let me know if you're in the chat. This one is from 8 months ago from Markle, Moldovan. This happened to me and my sister not long ago, just last November. Holy crap. So, 8 months ago. Anyways, so this is probably 2 years ago. So me, 13, and my sister, 14, decide to go out. It was almost winter. The days were short. We were on our way home, going down a street. When we get almost to our bus, it was at 7 p.m. and pretty dark. That's when we saw a man getting out of a parking spot with a car. I jokingly said, "Imagine that man kidnapping us." We laughed, but how it was night and how we were ready for anything. That man got out of the parking spot and started driving toward me and my sister, so that when we knew we were doomed and he slowed down, me and my sister started panicking as the man slowly went past us with his head toward us and a glare I'll never forget, but a lot more terrifying looking if we were little kids. I don't know, it's not written very well, so I'm really sorry. We saw that and we were in survival mode. We see a kick store across the street, so we try to run inside. But as we get to the door, the lady comes out and tells us the store is closed and closes the door in our face. The man thought we ran down the street, so he started speeding down. We were safe. We weren't. We sighed in relief, thinking it was just our paranoia. That's when we hear the car again, speeding our way. That's when we knew we were on our own. Scared, not knowing what to do. Phone's dead. We thought we were going to die. My sister froze in place. She was terrified, and so was I. The man tried to park in front of us, but that's when I said to myself, I need to at least get her out of here, so I wait for him to start parking. My sister was gripping onto my arm. The man was almost done parking, and he's getting out of his car. That's when I yelled to my sister, "Run, bitch! Run like your life depends on it, 'cause it does." And then we started running like we never did, and we were fast. Nothing stopped us from escaping that mother. We get to our station 10 minutes early, but we were okay because he lost us, and there were 3 boys with us, so we felt kind of safe. The bus came, and we went home. On the bus, my sister made me promise to never tell Mom or Dad because they would never let us be alone again. But I had to, so I told Mom, and she said she knew she felt that something wasn't right. She told me her whole body started hurting, and that's how she knew something was going wrong with us. My sister to this day still doesn't know how they found out. I'll tell her maybe later in life, if we make it that far. She almost got kidnapped 3 times before that because she's a beautiful girl with a very womanly body, so she's a big target. This happened in Germany. Okay. How we doing, people? How we doing? How long have we been doing this? Usually it tells me how long. We've been on for a little bit, eh? Still here, okay. Just checking. Let's see. This is from 9 years ago. Wow. Not only did I not know Quora existed, but I didn't know it's been around for longer than 9 years, okay? I don't want to say their name because I'm going to butcher it. But the question was, what is it like to be kidnapped? What? This is crazy. This is 9 years ago. Okay, I'm going to skip over that one because it doesn't look like anything really. Okay. 66 minutes. Thanks, Gling. This is from Calvin Rosser, updated 5 years ago. The question was, who has escaped being kidnapped and how? In 2017, a pretty woman almost got me. I flew from New York to Nicaragua, and upon landing, I grabbed my bags and looked for a taxi. Dozens of men approached me. Taxi, taxi. I asked how much. $100. Skeptical of airport taxis, I thought, no, my flight was only $92. This is a huge scam. Noticing my frustration and confusion, a well-dressed pretty woman called me over. She looked like she had come from New York and spoke perfect English. She says, "Hey, where you headed? What do those taxi drivers try to charge you?" I say $100. She says, "Oh, they're trying to rip you off. It's only $20 if you go from the bus station, which is about 10 minutes away. I can take you." Me, okay, wow, yeah. So at this point, I'm ready to hop into this nice stranger's car. She seemed legit, had a plausible story. I'm exhausted from drinking the night before, and I really didn't like getting scammed by airport taxi drivers. But something still felt off, so I hesitated. She says, "You seem nervous. Is everything all right?" I don't mean to be rude, but something doesn't feel right. She says, "I'm trying to help you out here. Those drivers are gringos, like you, and trying to rip you off. The bus station is a quick ride away. You coming?" At this point, I'm sweating, fatigued, confused. I look over at the taxi drivers, and one of them is waving his arms. Eventually, he came over, grabbed me, and said in Spanish, "I'll take you for $80. Don't trust this woman. Come with me." I went with my gut and followed the taxi driver, and luckily I did. As we started driving, he told me that I almost got kidnapped. That woman was part of a local airport cartel. Her job is to lure foreigners like me into her car. I asked what would have happened, and the guy says, "I don't know. If you're lucky, they would have stolen all of your stuff. If not, I don't know." I sat in silence for the rest of the ride. Ooh! That was crazy. Okay, let's see. This is from CW204 from 3 years ago. And the question was, they're all related, but there are different ones that they answered. What is the closest you've been to getting kidnapped? When I was 7 or 8, maybe, my dad had a graduate student who lived with a pretty serious mental illness. He became a family friend, so this might not be quite as weird as it sounds. But one day he came over to our house when my parents were out and convinced the sitter that it would be okay for him to take me and my sister to visit his mom. It would turn out that he was off his meds and not thinking all that clearly. His mom lived a couple of hours away, and after visiting her, we ended up staying at a motel with him. He didn't harm us in any way. Well, I was fed his mom's fish cakes, which I wasn't fond of, but that's about it. But our family was, of course, frantic. I don't recall the whole thing all that well, but I think it was the cops who eventually located us, either that night or the next day. Oddly enough, this made very little impression on me at the time, other than the fish cakes. I probably had books to read. Whoa. That's true, Gling. I think most women aren't actually the predators. They're the bait, if you will. Or what's it called? It's not called the bait. It's called something else. When you're the one that's like supposed to lure the people in. I mean, they're just as guilty because they know what's going to happen to the people that they lure in. So they'd still be like accessories to the crime, of course. But This one's from Karen Marie Shelton from April 24th, so very recently. And the question was, have you ever been kidnapped? She says, yes. When I was in my early 20s in St. Louis, I lived with my boyfriend. We both worked at a large government agency. We had a large group of friends who would all party together. At one particular party, there were a lot more guys than women. The guys were all playing football, air hockey, some other games while drinking excessively. I've never been a huge drinker, so I wasn't drinking. I was just hanging out in the kitchen, looking at magazines because I found the party to be kind of boring with mostly men playing games. At one point, a guy I had seen around town but didn't really know walked into the kitchen and started chatting with me. He said, "Your boyfriend seems to be ignoring you." I told him my boyfriend was really into competition and loved playing in foosball competitions. Then he walked over to me and unexpectedly grabbed me. He picked me up and started walking out the back door. I was kicking and punching him while struggling to get away. Another woman walked into the kitchen at that moment, and I screamed for her to help me. I was frightened, but in shock since I didn't see it coming. The guy, whose name I didn't even know, laughed and told her, "It's okay, we're just playing. She's fine." The woman ran into the foosball room, grabbed my boyfriend, told him some guy just carried me out of the house. My boyfriend ran out of the house after us, caught up to us as the man was pushing me into his car. I was still fighting and kicking, but he told me if I didn't shut up, he was going to make me, and I was frightened out of my mind. Just as my boyfriend got to the car, he changed his entire demeanor and said, "Hey man, you were ignoring her, so I was just taking her to get something to eat." No, that was not the case. My boyfriend quickly analyzed the situation, grabbed my hand, told the guy he'll take care of her from here. The guy got in his car and drove off, and I burst into tears. We went back into the house and called the police. After talking to them on the phone, they said no crime had been committed and that was it. Wow. I have no idea what could have happened to me. Maybe nothing. Maybe something very bad. After that incident, I was always on guard at parties. Actually, I became hypersensitive to my surroundings after that. From that point on, I was always looking to see where the exits were. I always had money and change tucked into a pocket if I had to escape. To this day, I still keep money in my pocket, but I always have my phone with me. I have a tracker on it in case I disappear and my family can track me, and a panic button on my home alarm system, and cameras to back up on my cloud. Yes, I am paranoid, but better safe than sorry. When I hear about women at bars or parties getting drugged and assaulted, I realize how lucky I was that I had not been drinking and had my wits about me so many years ago. I was also lucky that another woman saw the situation and helped me. I also understand after my incident how serial killers grab women, children, and weaker victims right out of public view. It's the element of surprise and not being 100% aware of your surroundings that can put you in the worst danger. Stay safe, everybody. Dang. God dang. I'm just looking for the next one because there's some of them that's like sponsored stories in between the other stories, and then like kidnapping tips in there. Okay, hold on. Okay, here's one from James Bergen from 3 years ago. He says, once in Asia, I had gone into town to the bank, got $200 US from the ATM there, walked 3 blocks to the market, did some shopping for a few extra things, left, and a trike pulled right up. Told him where I wished to go, set price, and got in. He missed the steer we were to make a right on and just went straight. And I said to him, we need to turn back there. He just kept going, till we were near the outskirts of town, in the wrong area. He made a left-hand turn onto a narrow street, slowed down. There was a security guard in front of a business to my right. I bailed out of the trike and ran to the security guard. He kept going with my fruit I had bought, only looking back and speeding up, so I lost my fresh fruit. The guard got me a different trike to home. Cost me more. More than I would have paid the other driver as further away from home. I do wonder if he had seen me get money at the ATM. As in a country where $5 a day for a 12-hour day was a minimum wage, $200 was big money to have on you. Another time in Colombia, I was taken to the Albion to Bogota, the fancy first-class bus. We came around a bend, and a tree was on fire across the road, and people with guns. We all got off the bus and went into a cantina. They burnt the bus. Last I seen the driver. I got talking to them. They put on some music. I danced with the women there, got drunk off my butt with them. Just at daylight, they said something about military coming. Threw me in the back of a truck, and I ended up in Bogota with a splitting headache. But I did have a good time that night. Man, that was all over the place. Oh my God. That was all over the place. We're just going to read a couple more. And then we're going to call it good. I'm just glad this is working. That means I can do it again. Easier. I have the perfect setup right now. I wish my husband could see it, because every time he's home when I live stream, it never works right. This is from Julie Massey Howard from 4 years ago. What's the scariest thing you escaped due to pure luck? So, years and years ago when I was young and foolish and in college, I decided to visit a friend over Christmas break. I borrowed my father's truck to go there. I had a timetable I was going by because a winter storm was coming and I needed to drive 3 hours home before that storm hit. So I started back home with what I thought was plenty of time, but had not checked the new weather report. The winter storm came in hard and fast while I was driving, with snow and ice. I was terrified. Oh, wait a minute. No. Sorry. I got sidetracked. That was a different kind of story. Anyway. Okay. This is from 5 years ago, from Jane Lee Holmes. What's the most frightening and closest encounter you've had from being kidnapped, and how did you get away? So Barb and I didn't have a ride home. It was always like that when we were 15. Everyone was leaving the rock festival, so we headed out too. Suddenly, she saw a guy she knew and asked him if he could drop us off near home. He said sure. But when we got in the car, he got in the back seat with us, and 2 more guys got in the front and took off out of the parking lot. The driver missed our turn and started saying we were going where he wanted us to go. The one next to him seemed to think it was a good idea, and Barb's friend in the back seemed helpless to do anything. The man drove under a bridge and parked way down by the river and said we could walk home from there. He locked the doors. Barb started yelling to the guy in the back with us to make him let us out, and the 2 in front talked. Barb began to melt the back of the guy's car seat with her cigarette. I was shocked. "Stop it," I whispered, but she was determined. The guy in the back began to tell him to let us out right now, and he seemed like he was going to, but he suddenly smelled his seat burning and started yelling, "What's going on?" He got out and ran around the back door, and Barb and I each jumped out of our respective doors, running at top speed up to the highway, leaving the guy yelling from his back seat down by the river. Ugh. Yikes. This one's from Stephen Solomon from 3 years ago. What's the scariest situation you've ever been in that you're lucky to have survived? Okay, so this might not be a kidnapping one. We're just going to skip this one then. Trying to stick to the subject at hand. Hold on, just let me see something here really quickly. Okay, never mind. All right, so this happened to my little sister and me in Torrance, California, when we were 7 and 5 years old. In our case, it was a pretty blonde lady who offered us a ride in her car, stating that her husband was a police officer. I told her, I don't care who your husband is, you're a stranger, and our mother doesn't allow us to take rides from strangers. Then the woman looked directly at my little sister and asked if she wanted a ride. I hung on to my sister and said, no, she can't ride with you either. I'm in charge of her. And my sister and I walked home. I didn't think much of it until years later, and then it hit me. Oh, dang, dude. God dang, dude. I think we're going to do like one or two more. Then we're going to... Oh, that might be it. Oh, there's so many related questions to this. Okay, so there's only like a couple more, and they're really short. This one says, this is from Michael Fairgate from 4 years ago, and the question was, what will happen to you if you get kidnapped? But he says, my friend in high school got kidnapped, but only for a day. But it was a terrifying experience. As he was walking to school, a van pulled up, stopped, and pulled him into it. He said he was quickly blindfolded, tied, and gagged. During the van ride, his shoes and socks were pulled off, leaving him barefoot. He knew he was in trouble when his bare feet were secured and tickled. Ugh. He doesn't remember how he got to a secluded room because he blacked out. He woke being tied to a bed, stripped of his clothes except his boxers. The blindfold had come off, so he could see the bare room and his body tied to the bed frame. He managed to loosen his right bare foot and use his bare toes to loosen the other bare foot. His clothes were on the ground near the bed, and he noticed his cell phone was still in his pocket. He used his toes again to retrieve it and dial 911 with his big toe. Thank goodness for him. His toe was able to help the police locate him soon after. After being rescued and questioned, he was released to his parents. The kidnappers were never found and didn't ask for a ransom. I made it a point to walk with him to school from that day forward. I don't know anyone who would let their kid walk to school after that. Are you serious? There's just one. This one is by Muhammad Alessiad from 4 years ago. And it said, did you almost get kidnapped as a kid, and how did you get away? And he said, yes, I am 10 years old, and I beat the man in the sensitive area of his and ran away in the Shura. And after making sure of the man's departure, I was able to return home. So that was a 10-year-old saying he had almost been murdered. Kidnapped. Holy crap. Well, it looks like there was 5 people here, so thanks for joining me. Man, my voice is loud. It's like it's going to go out because I haven't done this in a while. I'm a little rusty, if you can't tell. But this has brought up an entirely new, website for me for when I'm searching for stuff, so that's really cool. If you guys have any requests or anything for next time or videos coming up, you can leave them in the comment section below, or you can put it on the community tab or anywhere you want to if you're still here. But thanks for joining me. I'm glad this worked out and that the live stream only gave us a moment of torture and seemed to be fine. Hey, Smoky Mountain Reads. You will see me again. I like reading to people. I enjoy it, so this is my outlet. Yep, we'll see you again. Sorry, my voice sounds like it's not It sounds like it's trying to go out. Anyway, thanks for joining me today. I'll see you guys again really soon. Bye.